Hey there, space enthusiasts. Ready for another deep dive?
I'm ready.
Awesome. So this time we're focusing on some pretty amazing recent events.
Definitely amazing. We have a newly visible comet that could be a comet of the century. And we'll talk about a powerful solar flare that, it erupted from the sun.
Right. And on top of all that, the successful launch of the Europa Clipper mission, which, that could totally change what we know about life in the universe.
Yeah, I'm really excited about that one.
Me too. But, I bet some people are out there thinking, comets, solar flares, another space mission?
Yeah.
Been there, done that.
Right.
But trust me, these events are far from ordinary. By the end of this deep dive, you'll totally get why these things matter. And not just to, scientists and astronomers.
Definitely. These events matter to all of us here on Earth.
Okay, so first up, Comet C 2023-A3. This comet is getting everyone excited because it's becoming visible to the naked eye.
Yeah.
And some predictions say it could be one of the brightest comets we've seen in decades.
Mm-hmm. It might not quite reach a negative magnitude like the initial predictions said.
Oh, so not quite as bright as they thought.
Right. But it's still an amazing sight, historically speaking.
This is still a big deal.
Oh, absolutely. And you got to remember, comets are kind of like, they can be really unpredictable. Some break up, some just fade away. Some even have these crazy outbursts.
But they're like wild cards.
Totally. You never know exactly what they're going to do.
That actually makes them even more interesting. Speaking of unpredictable, remember back in 2011, Comet Lovejoy?
Oh, yeah.
I remember it seemed kind of underwhelming at first, but then bam! It surprised everyone with that forward scattering thing.
Right. Where the sunlight just scattered off all the dust particles in its tail.
And suddenly it was this super bright fan-shaped thing across the sky. It was awesome.
Forward scattering is a cool phenomenon. It shows how comets can change so drastically in appearance based on their composition, and how they interact with sunlight.
It's like the same comet, but totally different.
Right. And for anyone who's wondering what forward scattering is, it basically happens when sunlight hits the dust tail at just the right angle.
Okay.
So the light scatters forward toward us. It's kind of like shining a flashlight through fog.
Ah, so the light gets amplified.
Exactly.
That's so cool. So good news for anyone who wants to see this comet for themselves. C 2023-A3 is moving from the pre-dawn sky to the evening sky.
It is, which means a lot more people will be able to catch a glimpse.
That's great.
Yeah, but there is a bit of a challenge. The full moon is really bright right now.
Oh, right.
So it might be harder to see the comet, especially if you're somewhere with a lot of light pollution.
That makes sense. But get this. Even with the moon being so bright, people have been able to see the comet's tail before the comet itself even rises above the horizon.
Yeah, it's crazy.
It's like the tail is a preview.
Right. That just shows you how massive this tail actually is.
Wow. So you don't even need a fancy telescope to see this comet.
Nope.
Binoculars will do the trick.
Binoculars. Or even just a smartphone camera on a tripod.
Seriously?
Yeah, you can get some pretty amazing shots. Of course, the dedicated astrophotographers out there are capturing some truly mind-blowing images. They're stacking hundreds of individual exposures, to create these incredibly detailed pictures of the comet's tail.
That's dedication. I read about some of these astrophotographers waking up at like 2:30 in the morning for weeks just to get the perfect shot.
Oh, that's commitment. But all of them say the same thing. They say the personal experience of seeing a comet, like with your own eyes, is just irreplaceable.
It's something else.
You just can't capture that same feeling in a photo.
Totally. And guess what? There's another comet on the horizon, literally.
Oh, yeah. Comet C 2024-S1, also known as ATLA.
Some early predictions say it could be even brighter than C 2023-A3.
Some are saying that. It's part of what's called the Comet family of comets. They're known for producing some really bright comets.
Like how bright?
Well, back in 1965, a Comet comet got to an unbelievable magnitude of Megas 10.
Megas 10? What does that even mean?
Almost as bright as the full moon. Can you imagine?
Wow. Okay, but there's got to be a catch, right?
There is. This new comet, C 2024-S1, it's what's called a sungrazer, meaning it passes super close to the sun.
Oh.
Yeah. That could create a spectacular display if it survives, but it also means there's a high risk of it just, disintegrating.
So we'll just have to wait and see.
Exactly. Sungrazers are always a gamble. It's either a dazzling show or PFT, nothing.
Okay, so we've got these amazing comets gracing our skies. But let's switch gears for a second. We also had this massive X-class solar flare erupt from the sun. And it wasn't just any solar flare.
Right. This was the most powerful one since 2017.
And it was aimed right at Earth.
It was. And that's where things get a little concerning. Solar flares can really mess with technology and communications here on Earth.
Seriously? Like, how?
Well, they can disrupt radio communications, GPS signals, and even in some cases, knock out power grids.
So it's not just a pretty light show.
Definitely not. Remember that major blackout in Quebec back in 1989?
I've heard about that.
That was caused by a powerful solar storm. And think about it, we're way more reliant on technology today than we were back then, so a similar event could cause way more chaos.
It's kind of scary.
It is. But the good news is we have observatories like NASA's Solar Dynamics Observatory that keep a constant watch on the sun.
So we get some warning.
Exactly. They give us valuable data and early warnings. So even though we can't actually stop solar flares, we can do things to minimize the damage. Like making our power grids more resilient and designing satellites that are better protected from radiation. It's an ongoing challenge to balance our dependence on technology with the unpredictability of space.
So true.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about a mission that launched just a few days ago.
Yep.
The Europa Clipper. This mission is going to Europa, one of Jupiter's moons. And a lot of people think Europa is one of the most promising places to look for life in our solar system.
It is, and the Europa Clipper is a seriously impressive piece of engineering.
Like, how impressive?
Well, it's the biggest interplanetary spacecraft NASA has ever built, and it's got the largest solar panels they've ever used. It's a really ambitious mission.
So I gotta ask, why not just land on Europa and look for life directly? Wouldn't that be easier?
There was actually an initial plan for a lander that would do just that. It would drill through the ice and look for signs of life in the ocean below.
So what happened?
It was just too complicated and too expensive and really risky.
That reminds me of that movie Europa Report, where the mission to Europa encounters all sorts of problems. It makes you realize how dangerous space exploration can be.
Yeah. And Europa Report, although it's just a movie, does highlight some of the real dangers and challenges of exploring a place like Europa. We still don't know exactly how thick the ice is or what it's made of.
Yeah.
So landing there is pretty risky.
So for now, we're sticking with orbital observation.
Yeah. The Europa Clipper will study the geology of the ice and look for any plumes of water erupting from the surface.
Which could tell us more about the ocean underneath. So playing it safe for now, but still getting crucial information.
Right. And this mission will pave the way for future missions, maybe even a lander someday. Space exploration is a step-by-step process.
So when will this Europa Clipper reach Europa?
Mark your calendars for 2031. It's a long trip, but it has the potential to change everything we think we know about life beyond Earth.
That's incredible. And while we're waiting, the European Space Agency, they have a mission heading to Jupiter's moons too. It's called JUICE, so it's like a race to Jupiter's moons.
It is kind of a race, a friendly one, of course. We're all driven by the same desire to understand the universe better.
It's amazing how much we're learning about space.
I know. It really shows our curiosity, our drive to figure out where we fit in the grand scheme of things. But before we dive deeper into the big picture, let's take a quick break. When we come back, we'll explore what all these events mean for you and how they all connect. Welcome back. So we've been talking about some pretty wild stuff happening out there in space. Comets, solar flares, a mission to search for life. It's a lot to take in.
Yeah, it really is. It's like all these pieces of a giant cosmic puzzle, but they're all connected, right?
They are, in ways we're only beginning to understand.
So help us connect the dots. What ties all of this together?
Well, think about this. The same solar flare we talked about, the really powerful one, it can actually affect how comets behave.
Really? The sun can affect comets. I never thought about that.
Oh, yeah. It's all about the solar wind.
Okay, remind me. What's the solar wind again?
It's this stream of charged particles that the sun releases, especially during solar flares, and that wind can really mess with a comet's tail.
Oh, right. Comet tails are made of dust and gas.
Exactly. So when the solar wind hits that tail, it pushes it away from the sun. That's what creates those amazing tails we see stretching across the sky.
So the sun kind of shapes comets, like a cosmic artist.
That's a great way to put it. And the connection goes even deeper. Solar flares can also cause auroras here on Earth.
No way. So it's like a chain reaction from the sun to comets to our own planet.
It is. It's pretty mind-blowing. And then when you think about missions like the Europa Clipper, I mean, we're not just exploring some random moon. We're trying to answer some of the biggest questions humans have ever asked, like, are we alone? How did life even begin?
So if we find even microbial life on Europa, that means life could exist in other places too, not just Earth.
Exactly. If life started in two different places in our own solar system, that means it could be way more common throughout the universe than we ever imagined. It would be huge.
That's incredible. Okay, so we talked about how the Europa Clipper is going to orbit Europa, not land on it. But what about in the future? Do you think we'll ever send a lander there to drill through the ice and really see what's down there?
I think it's definitely possible. I mean, there's a lot of interest in it. There aren't any official plans yet, but scientists and engineers are already working on ideas for a lander that could handle Europa's crazy conditions and actually drill into that ocean.
That would be amazing, but also really, really hard to pull off. Europa is a pretty harsh environment, right? With all that radiation from Jupiter and the extreme cold.
It is. But remember, we've landed rovers on Mars, and Mars has its own set of challenges. Those missions have taught us a lot about designing spacecraft for extreme places. So a Europa lander, it might be closer than we think.
That's really cool. Okay, let's talk more about solar flares. We mentioned they can mess with our technology here on Earth. Can you explain how that works?
Sure. Solar flares release these bursts of radiation and charged particles.
Yeah.
And those particles can interact with Earth's magnetic field and atmosphere. That's what causes problems with radio communications, GPS, and even power grids.
So they're more than just pretty lights in the sky.
Way more. Remember that blackout in Quebec we talked about? That was in 1989, and in 2012, there was a huge solar flare that almost hit Earth. If it had, it could have been way worse.
That's a little scary. But it sounds like we're getting better at predicting these storms, right?
Right.
And protecting ourselves.
We are. Scientists are constantly working on better forecasting models, and there are things we can do to protect our infrastructure, like making power grids stronger and designing satellites to withstand radiation better. It's all about understanding space weather and being prepared.
So respecting the power of nature, even when it's happening millions of miles away.
Absolutely. It just shows how connected we are to the sun, even though it seems so far away.
You know, discovering Comet C 2023-A3 and maybe seeing C 2024-S1 become a comet of the century, it's a reminder that the universe is always changing, always surprising us.
That's what makes space exploration so exciting. You never know what you're going to find. It's all about observing, exploring, asking questions. There's always more to discover out there.
It's like the universe is full of secrets just waiting to be uncovered.
Exactly. And maybe through exploration, we'll start to understand our own existence a little bit better. It's an amazing journey.
It really is. But before we get too philosophical, let's shift gears one more time. When we come back, we'll share some tips on how you can experience these celestial wonders for yourself, right from your own backyard. All right, welcome back. So we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive. Comets, solar flares, and even the search for life on Europa. It's been a pretty wild ride, right?
It has. But now that we've learned all this amazing stuff, what do we do with it?
That's the big question, isn't it? It's one thing to hear about these incredible things happening in space, but how do we, actually engage with it all?
Exactly. What we've talked about, it should spark your curiosity, make you want to learn more, maybe even see these things for yourself.
So you're saying take this knowledge and run with it.
Yeah.
But how? What can people actually do to, experience these celestial wonders?
Well, if you're interested in comets, there's this awesome software called Stellarium. It's basically like having a planetarium right on your computer.
Oh, I love Stellarium. It's so easy to use.
It is. You just put in your location and the time, and it shows you exactly what the night sky looks like. You can track comets, planets, constellations, even satellites.
It's like a map for the stars.
Exactly. And if you want to keep up with the latest space missions, like the Europa Clipper, there are tons of resources online. Websites, social media accounts, they all have updates on mission progress, launch schedules, even images and data sent back from the spacecraft.
And don't forget about those amazing astrophotographers out there sharing their passion and expertise online.
Definitely. There are some incredible astrophotography channels on YouTube.
Yeah, like there's one I follow called Misterios do Espaço. It's run by this guy, Alexandro Mota. His photos, especially of comets, are just stunning.
That's so cool. And it shows you don't need fancy equipment to get involved in space exploration. Even binoculars or a smartphone camera can capture amazing views of the night sky. Just get out there, look up, and be amazed.
So true. As we wrap up this deep dive, I can't stop thinking about the Europa Clipper and its mission to search for signs of life. What if, and I know it's a big what if, but what if they actually find evidence of life on Europa, even just microbial life? I mean, how would that change our whole understanding of, everything?
That's the ultimate question, isn't it? Finding life beyond Earth, even in its simplest form, would be a game changer. It would force us to rethink everything we thought we knew about life, about the universe, about ourselves.
It's almost too much to process.
It is, but that's what's so great about science. It always pushes us to expand our knowledge, to challenge what we think is possible.
And who knows what other discoveries are waiting for us out there. The universe is full of mysteries. And that's what makes exploring it so exciting.
Exactly. Every new discovery brings more questions. It's a never-ending journey.
Well said. And on that note, we'll leave you with this thought. Next time you look up at the night sky, remember, you're not just seeing stars. You're seeing life that has traveled for millions, maybe even billions of years to reach your eyes. It's a pretty humbling reminder of how vast and ancient the universe really is. So keep exploring, keep asking questions, keep looking up. You never know what wonders you might find.